Welcome to the Enterprise Excellence Podcast, where our purpose is to help create a better future. Learn from our world's experts how to improve your organization sustainably. Learn how to achieve and sustain an excellence journey for yourself, others, and the planet.
I'm your host, Brad Jennings, coming to you from Brisbane, Australia.
Welcome to episode 21 of the Enterprise Excellence Podcast. It is a great pleasure to have Katie Anderson on the show today. Katie is a researcher, author, and consultant in the areas of enterprise excellence. Her passion is helping people develop and grow. Katie is the author of Learning to Lead, Leading to Learn, the international #1 new release in leadership. Let's get into the episode. Katie, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Brad.
Katie, you've written this recent book, Learning to Lead, Leading to Learn, and you've been able to do that with Mr. Yoshino, an amazing person in the areas of enterprise excellence and continuous improvement. What brought you to this place? What's the back history of Katie Anderson that brought you to this place of writing this best-selling book?
It's a bit of serendipity and intention intertwined together. I started off my career in academia and actually lived in Australia for 4.5 years, where I received my master's degree and had a pivot there and moved into consulting. And that's when I first started to get exposed to enterprise excellence. And when I returned to the United States, I joined a performance improvement department at a local children's hospital at Stanford University. And through that, learned lean practices and techniques, continuous improvement methodologies, and the mindset. And fast forward 8 years, started my own consulting practice. And less than a year later, my husband came home and told me, or actually he sent me an instant message saying that he had an opportunity for his job for us to move to Japan. And as a continuous improvement practitioner and somebody who had studied the Toyota way and the Toyota production system, I was beyond thrilled and a little trepidatious because we had just had our second child. So there was a lot going on, but really excited. And luck would have it that a month after we found out about this amazing opportunity, I was speaking at a conference, the Lean Coaching Summit in Long Beach. And John Shook, who is the first non-Japanese employee of Toyota, and at that time was the head of the Lean Enterprise Institute, had invited his former boss and mentor, Isao Yoshino, to be at the conference. And so I had an opportunity to meet Mr. Yoshino. He gave me his business card and said, look me up when you move to Japan. And, then fast forward, another six to 8 months. Once we moved to Japan in January of 2015 and we got settled, I reached out to him and we set a date. And I made my husband take the day off of work because I thought this was for sure going to be a once in a lifetime opportunity to meet with this 40-year Toyota leader who had been one of the key people to develop A3 thinking at Toyota, who had trained John Shook and had been the leader of the training program for teaching the Toyota way to foreigners when Toyota was starting to expand overseas in the 1980s. So I was beyond thrilled. And we hit it off. And we just had this great day. And I realized, I guess in hindsight, learned that he is such this genuine, humble man who really has a passion for helping other people learn and develop and connecting. And we actually have those are sort of our shared, some shared themes in my life as well. And I would just jump on the bullet train and go down and visit him and spend the whole day together every 2 months. And over time, over the 18 months that I was living in Japan, we got together. We continued the relationship even when I moved back to the United States. He stayed at my house a few times. And out of that came this wild and crazy idea to partner together on a book. And that was about 3 years ago. And so we started with purposeful interviews. And I realized that the richness of his stories and experiences I needed to pivot in how we framed it, and I really needed to tell his learning story. So that was the long answer, but this is how the book came to be. And I'm so grateful for everything that I've gotten to learn from Mr. Yoshino and now get to share it with everybody through the book as well.
And Katie, was that part of the title? Like the one thing I found when I looked at your book, the title was really impactful, Learning to Lead, Leading to Learn. Is that one of the key insights you gained from Mr. Yoshino right from the start?
Absolutely. The very first time that I met him, actually it was right before I met him. So he was on stage at this conference. He said he and John Shook were on stage talking about their experience of being the manager and the direct report, or they called it a subordinate, in Japanese terms. And Mr. Yoshino said something that struck me as really profound, about that a leader's role is to set the direction, provide support, and develop themselves. And to me, that really speaks to this concept that we're always learning how to lead and leading to help other people learn and to create a learning organization. It's this really cyclical process. And if we ever remove ourselves as leaders from the concept that we're also learners, we really then lose our humility, lose our curiosity, and aren't going to be part of the learning organization. And so how can we always be improving how we're leading and then leading to improve as well? And it's sort of this cyclical learning and leading kind of are married together.
Wow, Katie. So in summary, as a leader, you're constantly learning yourself to be able to lead better. Mm-hmm. And then you're constantly leading others to help them learn and grow also.
Correct. And helping yourself. And then the meta is that you're also helping yourself through that process as well. You're challenging yourself to be a better learner and to be a better leader.
Katie, what are some of the key insights that you gained on how to do that? What were some of the key knowledge points throughout that journey of meetings and days and times you had with Mr. Yoshino?
One of the things that really struck me through all of my conversations with Mr. Yoshino is that it's not just learning through success, but also how can we learn through mistakes and failure. And that he says, failure is only failure if you haven't learned something that you couldn't have learned elsewhere. And so, and also this practice of deep reflection. Actually, the original working title of the book was Practicing Hansei. Hansei, the Japanese word meaning self-reflection, because to me, that's sort of the meta experience of working on to create this book with Mr. Yoshino was the practice of reflection. But really the stories, it's reflecting on learning to lead and leading to learn, which is how I ended up choosing the title. But I would say, how can we as individuals be reflecting more deeply, both on the things that have happened in the short term, but also taking a step back and starting to see the patterns over time for ourselves and for our organizations? And then what do we want to do to adjust and change? It's really the foundation of the plan, do, study, adjust cycle should be the study and adjust. But we usually are doing plan, do, and not really spending that time in reflection to learn.
Katie, what causes that? Because I can relate to what you're saying. I see it a lot through organizations where there seems to be a lot of doing, do. But when it comes to learning from something that's gone wrong or taking time to reflect on yourself or your team or the bigger picture, it seems to not really happen that much, if at all.
I'm certainly guilty of this as well. And I have to put great intention to building in the time for reflection. So often we have this sense of urgency that maybe at times is a false sense of urgency, because we have all these deadlines and these meetings, and we've created this system where we're running from here to there, and we don't feel like we have the time to slow down and think. But if we did take that time, it would actually solve more of the problems. So we're not having all these meetings talking about the same problems that we had the meetings to talk about the last 2 years. So when I work with leadership teams and with individuals, I help them identify a pattern that they can practice. What is even 10 minutes out of the day that they can carve and protect for some reflection? How do they set a plan at the beginning of the day and reflect on that? And even through that simple process of taking 10 minutes, this richness of learning and greater understanding starts to emerge. And so it's about slowing down and pausing, even just for a tiny bit, that will create that space, and through that sort of create a meta pattern in our organizations.
Katie, have you got an example of an organization where you've seen them really grow and develop and be able to bring in reflection and learning, both from mistakes, but also, I guess, individually as a leader or a person?
Certainly, I have a few in both of the healthcare organizations that I work directly in, and certainly the second one, we had a senior executive that was brought in who had a lot of experience in this type of thinking. He'd come from a different organization, James Hereford, and really brought in that senior executive direction, like this is what we're going to do, which makes a tremendous amount of impact in the organization. But even if taking like one cycle of, say, strategy deployment or Hoshin practices and having more structure and assignments of for senior leaders, like you own this segment of thinking about, say, quality or service delivery, and having an assigned responsibility to be the thought leader in the organization around that helped create deeper learning, and also helping leaders to go out and see what was actually happening and connecting with the people. We've often created cultures where we're just used to staying in our conference rooms or our executive offices, or now all working from home, wherever, we're just being on the computer, but not really going and connecting with the people who are doing the work. So by creating some structures, even in 1 year of having leaders assigned thought leadership on a certain topic and helping support them, having those conversations and providing the structured time for them to do the deeper thinking, that was really transformative for getting more clarity on not only the direction the organization needed to go, but also the real, I guess, operational realities of the current condition as well. So it wasn't, it didn't happen overnight. And again, that process continued on and on. But even over the course of, say, 1 year, by putting some structure and some process around it, the organization had some aha moments about how they were functioning in the past, and then starting to create some different habits around reflection and not just plan doing, but reflecting on what actually was happening.
Wow. Katie, so really, you mentioned in that conversation then that structure played a big part, that setting some time aside to be able to do the reflection, having some time to actually go and see and learn with people at the front line. What part does structure play? Because, I've been in leadership myself, and I know a lot of leaders where they'd say, look, I'm just so busy trying to put in structure and set times for these things, it's near impossible. But what part does structure play to help, and how did you overcome that?
Well, one thing that was tremendously helpful was creating a standard calendar, and the expectation that, certain meetings were happening on certain days that would lead up to Thursdays are when the senior leaders would go to Gemba or go to the different clinical sites to be checking in on what was happening, both from a management system perspective, but also from an operational improvement and operations perspective. And having that standard calendar allowed leaders to be aligned in what they were doing and created expectation of what was happening. So there was, it didn't mean that it just solved all the problems, but there certainly, it created the space and ability for people to show up as they had agreed upon without being pulled into all these other places, and setting some expectations that every morning there would be time for the frontline managers and the physician leaders to be doing a check-in, doing a huddle in their clinical areas and making that a priority. And so those structures and carving out the time in the calendar was a tremendous accelerator for the leaders to then be able to go and practice, because they could say, no, Thursday's the day I'm going in. They weren't expecting to be called into other cross-functional meetings at that time.
So the structure brings out a better rhythm for the whole process, but also enables that time to be set aside and dedicated to it.
Yes. And another structure that helped was was clearly laying out, what was the expectation when these leaders were going out. It's supposed, there's the whole management by walking around, but the difference of really going to Gemba is going with some intention. And we talk about that in the book. So what were the things specifically they were checking on, and what were, say, the 5 types of questions that they were going to ask the directors and the managers, and having that routine to practice was tremendously helpful for them too. So they knew what better looked like. And then to have a coach such as myself or someone else with them to help remind them of that practice and then reflect on it immediately after. And again, getting back to that, having time for reflection so they didn't just rush off to another meeting. And that type of structure really helped create the space for the behaviors, and also created the specific patterns of practice.
Wow. So Katie, we've spoken about the concepts of huddles and the concepts of Gemba walks or frontline walks or leading by walking around. But what you're saying out of the book, Learning to Lead, Leading to Learn, is that it's about when you go on that walk, you're doing that walk with the intention of learning. When it seems going to that huddle, you're going to that huddle with the intention of learning, reflecting, learning, checking, adjusting. Am I on the right track with that?
Absolutely. And so it's both learning for you as the leader, and also how are you, the leader, supporting the learning and the capability of the people that you're checking on. So it's not just checking to see that have you achieved the outcome check. It's checking on your thinking process. And then what type of coaching or support do I, as the leader, need to help provide to you so that you are more effective in developing that capability to solve the operational problem? This gets back to what I said in the beginning, that the leader's role is to set the direction or set that challenge. So where do we need to go? And then checking on the progress that the person's making, but providing the support so that they are developing the capabilities along the way, or barriers that need to be removed. And so having that clear intention and focus when you go in to check or go in to have a report out is tremendously was foundational to lean leadership.
Wow. So you're taking those standard systems that we'd all know from lean or continuous improvement, and you're applying the whole thought process of learning for yourself, but then also on how to help others grow and develop.
Absolutely. And it's not just about us as the leader coming in and having our answer or the solution there, but helping other people get to the right answer for their area and focusing on the process, not just the outcome.
Katie, are there any key leadership behaviors that you'd say are extremely important to doing this effectively?
Absolutely. One is having the self-awareness that we have been rewarded in our lives for being the experts, and often leaders are promoted because of having deep content expertise and knowledge. But when we move into a leadership role, it's less about our expertise as, a specific content knowledge, and more about how are we developing that capability for others. So when we can set that direction, but then not tell and give all the answers or tell people what to do, but show up asking more open-ended questions that help support somebody else to think more deeply. That is, to me, the number one accelerator. But also knowing that sometimes just asking open-ended questions isn't helpful. Sometimes people do need different type of support. So need to be taught how to do something, or demonstrated or given some advice. So it's being able to flex as a leader, but not jumping in as our first habit to tell people the answer. And that often comes from a deep desire to be helpful, but there's a disconnect between our ultimate outcome as a leader, or purpose as a leader, which is to help other people think and to grow and to solve problems, so that we're not solely responsible for that. So for me, the number one is asking more effective questions, and then listening with open ears and an open mind, and not sort of shutting down our own brain because of what we thought the answer was going to be.
So, Kate, it sounds to me like you're saying that really you need to go in there with the attention of asking some open probes, open questions, so you can truly understand and not be blindsided by your own traditional biases even. Like you're saying that sometimes the advice we could be giving to someone could be off course because we don't properly understand the situation.
Absolutely. And one way that leaders can sort of help remind themselves is you may have great experience in this from the past, have seen many, many, many similar situations, but you don't know exactly what's happening in this situation. So asking that person to tell you more and what they're thinking also allows them to explore it, but also for you to realize, whoa, maybe this is actually a slightly different situation. Not all the inputs are 100% the same as what I've seen in the past. And so holding off on our own assumptions as well, that what we've seen in the past is the same as what we're seeing here today.
Well, so that deep understanding of the situation, and then from there, your decision could go into coaching more with open questions still, or maybe there's a teaching or training requirement.
Absolutely. But again, often we jump into teaching or training too soon because we see someone not have an immediate answer. And this is another very important thing as leaders. And we're so busy, again, this gets back to not feeling like we have a lot of time and like we need that answer now. But really, if we're helping create a learning organization, we have to give space for learning, and learning happens a bit in the struggle. Oh, that's a great question. I need to go get more information, or I need to think about that. So if we then jump in and say, okay, now this is the time for me to give you my answer or to just tell you what to do because it feels expedient, we're then shortchanging that learning opportunity. So again, how do you even create half an hour for more thinking, but saying, I'm going to come back and check on you, and then if that person truly is stuck, then maybe there is some teaching, but hold back a little bit, allow for that struggle, allow for the thinking to happen.
Katie, this is probably the $1 million question on the topic. With leaders being so busy, so rushed, feel like they're fighting fires all day, flat out. What's the benefit for them of taking this extra time and actually asking more open questions, giving people the time to think and learn themselves, rather than just saying, just go do this. This will fix it. Just go do it.
Well, when we show up giving all the answers and telling people what to do, it's almost like we've created some learned helplessness in our organization. We've trained people to come to us to give all the answers. And when we are giving the answers, when we're telling, we ultimately end up owning the responsibility for that problem. And so then we feel even more burdened, like, oh my gosh, I own all of the problems in the organization. So, and that's not possible. And part of the overburdening that often we feel when we're in a leadership role is because we haven't actually really set that clear direction so that people are working in alignment and know what direction to be focusing themselves, but giving true responsibility for problem-solving ownership to other people. And we take that away when we tell people what to do. And so I call it taking an intention pause. So reminding ourselves, what's my ultimate purpose and goal here? It's not that I want to own all of the thinking and all the problem solving in the organization. I want us to be moving in the right direction. So reminding ourselves that slowing down and just saying, okay, I'm going to hold back a little bit more in this situation to connect more with that purpose. And so to really connect those behaviors that you are going to serve you and overcome those habits that you might have to jump in and just keep moving along, because ultimately then you're going to be overburdened and burnt out.
Well, Katie, so you're saying that a lot of the overburden and time poor position of a leader could be because of their language and their approach and them owning all the problems, owning all the issues.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's a really hard thing to, recognize in ourselves that our own habits are actually creating the outcomes that it's sort of this vicious cycle that then we feel like we have to be the problem solver for everything. And then we're overburdened and we feel I'm under that much more pressure. So we need to break that cycle and bit by bit. And it can be hard.
Yeah. Katie, what sort of results do you see organizations achieve if they can break that cycle and start to really learn to lead, learning to lead, leading to learn, and covering those aspects we've spoken about.
Yeah. What's always been amazing to me in both the organizations that I have worked in as an employee, as well as being an external coach or consultant, is that over time, I'm talking like a year or 2 years and even more, people report that they experience more time and space. So it feels like more work in the beginning because, this concept of slow thinking and fast thinking, when we're creating new habits, it's hard. We have to think purposefully about what we're going to do. But as we start to be more effective at asking questions and creating those routines for us to go see with intention, over time, other things start to diminish, like all the extra meetings that we had. Well, we're actually solving problems and communicating in a more routine and structured way. And so then the time starts to, the pressure starts to decrease because we're not so overburdened. In many ways, all the meetings and things that we've layered on our schedules is because we don't have those systems and structures and the accountability. No, I don't like the word accountability process, but the checking process, the visibility of what's happening in service of achieving that challenge or the direction or the goals that we need for the organization. So if we can start putting those structures and practice those behaviors over time, other things will start to come off the calendar because we're being more effective and purposeful with our time.
That's a great outcome. And I could imagine that extra time and extra space just creates better performance. If a leader has a clearer head and less stress, that's got to be a good thing.
Oh, well, absolutely. And then you're able to, it's the virtuous cycle, because then you feel less stressed when you're going to check and you feel like you have more time to coach and develop people and still get your other work done that you need to. So, the problems you have to solve, as well as the coaching and development work that's your responsibility as well. So for sure, but in the beginning, it can feel like a lot. And so it's having the patience and sort of the long-term look.
Katie, you've got the book that's come out. It's an amazing book. What are you focused on now in your career and what you're doing? And especially around that topic you mentioned around how leaders can bridge the gap to actually go through this phase of pain and hardship to learn the new habits and to shift into a new style of leadership.
So I feel so fortunate to have learned from Mr. Yoshino's stories and all of the lessons that come through from his experience of 40 years, like even starting as a early college graduate to a senior executive. And what's so nice to learn from stories is you can take many richness of learning out of there. But what this book doesn't tell you is the how. And so where I see my passion and focus right now is helping people take these leadership practices, these concepts, and then how they apply them in their own lives. So how are they taking these concepts that they have learned and reflecting on their own current behavior and starting to practice some new ways so they are continuing to be learning leaders themselves.
Oh, that's really cool. So you're looking at helping, I guess, as many leaders and people as you can to form those new habits and develop those new capabilities.
Absolutely. And it's through a variety of different, methods. I have coaching cohorts, different classes that I teach, as well as, how one-on-one. And I'm looking at putting together some companion guides too, that really can help people take the reflection questions that are at the end of every chapter, and really use that as a place for their own reflection and learning and have some forums for discussion as well.
That's great. It's so cool how you're really looking to consider how to put what's in the book into practice. Because I think that's often the challenge, isn't it? We can read so many books and learn so many things, but do we actually, or are we able to actually put it into practice?
Yes. And that's what I would challenge everyone. And why I put questions at the end of every section, because learn from the stories, but also reflect on your own life and using the book as a way to really start that practice of reflection and then start putting the structures in place for your own learning as well.
Katie, I have some other questions I want to ask, but it seems timely that I just ask, how do people reach out to you if they do want to connect in relation to any of those topics?
Great. Well, there are a few ways. So the easy thing to remember is the book's website is learningtolead.com. And that directs to my website too, which is KBJ Anderson, Anderson. And that's my handle actually on Twitter. And you can find me on LinkedIn. It's at KBJ Anderson. My middle name is my maiden name, which is Brian Jones. So my initials are KBJA. And so that was how that all came about. But I love connecting with people on LinkedIn, on Twitter. The book can be bought on Amazon in both ebook and in paperback. And of course, you can reach out to me directly from my website as well.
And Katie, I've got a question for you here is, what have you learned recently that you didn't know before? What's a recent insight that you've had?
That's a great question. I feel like I've been learning so many things lately. For me, actually, a lot of it's around technology. You and I were talking about how, we all have a bit of a learning curve with our microphones and other things like that. I've had such a deep experience of learning through working with Mr. Yoshino, but for me, it's the thing I've been really focusing on is how can we take experiences that we'd had in person and still stay with the principle of having an interactive learning experience, but do that effectively in a virtual environment. And how do we still maintain the sense of community and connection and do that here with all of us sitting in our own rooms as well? And so I don't know if I've had like the deepest learning, but to me it's about, and I'd love to hear other people's ideas on how you're doing it. But to me, it's about how do we engage and have direct connections and conversation, and then do other things that can happen offline, but use the opportunities for synchronous time for enriched connections. So I guess maybe it's the challenge in front of me to figure out, but that's the thing I've been pondering and trying to learn for myself is how do we still maintain connection and have a really, a meaningful learning experience, but in a virtual environment.
That's a powerful area of focus for you going forward.
Yeah.
Especially in relation to the book. It totally relates.
Yeah, yes.
Because the product, there's an amazing productivity gain, efficiency gain for us, isn't there? And a way to reach globally and learn and develop. But like you said, the challenge is connectedness. And how do we still create that interpersonal connectedness?
And on the upside, the beauty is we can, reach out to all these people around the world at the same time. I mean, one of the things Mr. Yoshino and I had to let go of is we'd had this whole book tour planned across Europe and North America for this year and had all these great in-person events planned. And, of course that had to change. But we had, with the help of some friends, and you're there too, Brad, we had these two great global celebrations that were, Zooms of like 65, 70 people each. And it was really fun and amazing that we were able to have all these people around the world. So again, there's some benefits too. So how do we harness the really positive side of our experience now and overcome the things that are the more challenging? But I think it's a great time to be conceiving of the future of learning and leading and connection.
It certainly allows us to learn more broadly. I'm based here in Australia. You're in America. I've learned from you this morning or today. And Katie, I really appreciate your time in sharing and providing knowledge and helping us create a better future. It's a great topic you focused on.
Thank you, Brad. Well, you're helping me fulfill my joy and passion, which is connecting with people around the world to live and lead with intention. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Katie.
The first key takeaway for me from this episode was creating a learning organisation is a key element to achieving enterprise excellence, and it starts from the top with leadership curiosity, humility, and constant learning. So many studies have shown that a large portion of culture derives from leadership behaviour. Forming a learning culture within your organisation starts with your leadership. To achieve this, you need your leaders to be demonstrating behaviours of curiosity and humility. Jumping to conclusions and blaming others is the opposite of this. Being curious takes more time than jumping to conclusions based on past experience. The extra time is worth it when you consider the resulting cultural outcomes. The extra time to show curiosity and humility will save you time in the long run through the improvement in cultural drives. The second key takeaway for me is the power of reflection. Leaders who give themselves the time to reflect often will naturally learn more, demonstrate greater curiosity and humility. Leadership reflection to me links to Jim Collins' famous statement of looking in the mirror versus looking out the window and blaming others. A leader that spends time where value is created, at the front line of their organisation, reflects on what they see and hear, and thinks what they can do to help move the organisation forward based on their learnings is looking in the mirror. They are constantly learning and turning this learning into actions they can control to move the organisation forward. Thanks again for your time and knowledge, Katie. We really appreciate it. Bye for now.